You're up and ready.
All right. My name is Scott Bartlett, and I've lived here in Bellevue for 3 years. So this is kind of a 3-year project, but I count it as a 2-year project because last year I couldn't really walk or do anything because I had surgery. When we first moved in, this backyard was pretty much empty. There was a half-raised bed in the back corner, and there's a swing set. And I think when we went through and looked, there's 3 different types of grass and assorted weeds along the fences and whatever. Right now, I think I have 121 plant species back here. When we first moved in, there were no hummingbirds and minimal bees. We'd see bees on some of the clover, which was weeds in the grass, but most of them were honeybees. Now, I'm pretty sure the count is way above 40 different types of bees and everything, and I've made a point to try to attract solitary bees and to try to make pollination, plants, food, and everything else available for them throughout the year. So that's kind of the history of where this came from and everything. If you look at the PowerPoint presentation, I have it listed as cheap and lazy, but it's kind of a cheap and easy thing. I'm a lazy gardener. So when I first moved in, you'll see before and after pictures. This particular area of the garden, this was just a weed patch. I ended up having to restructure some stuff because of water runoff. So the idea was to make sure that this was as easy as possible. So as you can see, pasta is very simple, and surprisingly, the bumblebees and the hummingbirds really like the flowers on these, so that's been a really nice addition. My partner does not particularly like the color pink, so as an homage to my husband, we have a pink area here. All of these are perennials. I've lost one of them and I replanted, but for the most part, most of these come back. Butterfly bush is a little raggedy right now, but that'll be discussed later. Bee balm bloomed earlier, so we had plenty of stuff there. Now the butterfly bush is blooming. As you can see, the black-eyed Susans are coming on. So is the lobelium. And then butterfly weed will start going, and we'll have kind of a rotation of different flowers. This was done out of necessity to keep the water from draining into the corner of my house, and we kind of dug this and everything goes off into the corner. I don't like corners and I don't like fences, so if I can plant an area where I don't have to mess with stuff, that makes it pretty easy. So this whole area was nothing but a swing set. It was a dirt patch. Like I said, there was a small raised bed in the corner, and we extended that to kind of increase the food production. Like I said, no bees. If you really look at this up close, there are tons of bees all over. You have sweat bees and bumblebees and everything else. You kind of have to stand there for a few seconds and you'll see a bunch of them. There's some down here, honeybees down there. All sorts of little bees buzzing around. Here's a nice one here. And like I said, by having different food sources throughout the growing period and everything, it's been pretty beneficial for them. Lots of butterflies, not necessarily in the heat of the day. Usually we have quite a few in the morning and quite a few later in the afternoon. I've had monarchs and swallowtails and all sorts of stuff. So just a matter of what's blooming. If you were here 2 weeks ago, you would have saw the lilies. They really did well this year. And that goes back to that whole cheap thing. Those were nice clearance lilies. I bought those for 25 cents, I think, at Home Depot. Threw them in the ground and they all took off.
We have a question about what are the bright pink flowers?
What are the bright pink flowers?
These right here, coneflowers and echinacea. And then that's just a cultivar version. These I got from the Nebraska Monarch group. And surprisingly, I planted them early in the spring and they've all flowered already. So I'm really happy with the way these have grown. I wasn't expecting these to flower. I'm kind of a long-term gardener. I look for a year down the road or 2 years down the road. I've been really happy with the way these have flowered out. Then, of course, these are just different colors. And I have some yellow and some red ones over here. Those were on clearance too. They were practically dead. But I threw them in the ground just to see what they do, and they took off. Same for this tick seed right here, this one.
Yep. Red ones.
Then the hollyhocks in the center, those are kind of, they've got a little bit of sentimental value for me. My grandmother had always had hollyhocks in the corner of her garden, the back corner of her garden. And I went back to visit. My uncle lives in that house now, and the hollyhocks were still there. And he said that he had never done anything with them. They just stayed there and kept coming back year after year after year. So I took some of the seeds from them, and sure enough, they grew. And now I have hollyhocks from my grandmother's garden in here. But you can see, I mean, there's all sorts of little butterflies and bees floating around in here. I've got lance leaf coreopsis in here, and there's all sorts of different things planted in here. There's asters. This is primrose, and I did not plant that. I'm not sure where that came from. I had one over on the fence like 2 years ago, and it just migrated over here on its own, I think. So as far as like history with gardening, I'm 54, and both of my grandparents sets of grandparents garden, and it was kind of out of mental health and for food production. Both of them grew green beans and beets and radishes and tomatoes and all sorts of things that they would can and freeze and keep. So I kind of have a history with that. My dad is a real avid gardener. He really likes to garden. He doesn't like to try new things. He does the same thing over and over and over. All of my uncles on my mom's side, my uncle Ernie, he likes to garden. My uncle Doug has a beautiful backyard. He's more into the aesthetics and making it look pretty. My dad's side of the family, my uncle Harold, Marvin, and Jean, they used to have huge gardens. And it was a pretty vital part of the community. And they would give food away to neighbors. You know, it wasn't unheard of to give a 5-gallon bucket of tomatoes away, or a couple of big old sacks of cucumbers or squash or potatoes away to neighbors. And it was nice because that gave a kind of a chance to build a stronger community and to share food. And I'm one of those people, if you can share food, I think that's a really good idea. So that's where the history of where it kind of comes from with me. And my Aunt Ruby has an amazing garden, and she continues to do stuff. So,
Yeah, question.
Don't want to interrupt on your Aunt Ruby, but there's a question. Did you plan this garden, or more just throw seeds and plants in wherever?
when we first moved in, this was a bare patch because there was a swing set here. So I thought that this would be a great place to just throw some stuff in the ground, see if I could attract hummingbirds. We had been living out at Beaver Lake with my parents, and when we moved into town, I thought, hey, we'll try to do as many hummingbirds as that were out there, and we didn't have any. So I planted a couple of bags of zinnia seeds. They ended up getting about this tall. This whole thing just grew, and I thought, okay, good. I've got a good backyard to grow things in. And attracted a couple of hummingbirds, but nothing major. And hopefully we'll see them today. Usually they're a little skittish, but I have quite a population of female hummingbirds that come in. We've seen as many as 4 at one time, so I know there's at least 4. Last year, there were a lot more of them, so I'm wondering if the late freeze in May or the late freeze in April didn't have something to do with that. So trying to make sure that I have enough food for them and have the feeders out. The whole idea was to try to have a place for them to nest. So planned this, we're going to do blackberry hedge. So I know they like to nest in tall height and places where you can't see them. When we lived in Las Cruces, we had to refill the hummingbird feeders every 3 days because they drink them dry, and that's in New Mexico. And the cool thing was we had a great big tree next to our apartment, and they would build their nest right on top of the branch. So there'd be this little nest that would set right on top of the branch, and she'd disappear up there and plop in. We watched several different ones hatch out. So the goal is to maybe get them in the peach tree or to get them to nest up in here or someplace, but we'll see what happens. Doing a lot of experimentation as far as like planning. It's more out of necessity. This bed right here, like I said, I don't want to have to deal with stuff. That was a pain to have to weed along here. So I decided to do perennials, decided to do stuff that would feed hummingbirds and bees and have an area where I don't have to mess with it. I leave it in the fall, so I don't cut everything back. I leave it so that there's places for bugs and insects and everything to live over the winter, and then chop it down in early May and throw it all in recycling and let it grow. And there it is. So as far as the rest of the planning, I identify an area I don't want to deal with, like I hate things, so I put in something where I don't have to do a lot of work. It's a little bit of work up front, but in the long run, it saves you a lot of time. I don't like corners, so. And that's just free pallets. Cut it down, spray painted it, put it in the corner, and away it goes. And I know cheap can be an ugly word, but some people say frugal or whatever. There's a lot of places to find resources, and pallets have been really good. I'll show you my raised beds that I made out of them. I made that fence out of pallets. A lot of the stones I got for free because people were getting rid of them. A lot of the bricks I ended up getting a marketplace for really inexpensive. And other things I just kind of figured out and go from there.
Don had a question. Is that a bee nesting log on your fence?
It is, yes. So I have a bee house, and if you look really close, some of them are started. I don't want to mess with them. They've started in there, and I've also drilled holes in the logs and everything to see if I can attract other bees. I've been messing around over here quite a bit, doing the beds and trying to get everything started. So I imagine once there's not so much traffic here, they'll start moving in a little more. That's the hope anyways. So hopefully, and I have another one that's going to go on the other side, that whole cemetery thing. So we tried to do a couple of new things. We ended up losing our tree in the front yard. It was huge, and we were afraid it was going to fall on our house or the neighbor's house or whatever. And we felt really bad about taking it down. So we took one down and replaced it with 4 others. And I've never done this before. So we have a pear tree. And when it came to me, it was no taller than that fence around it. And it is a 5-pair pear tree. So apparently it's been grafted with 5 different types of pears. We'll see. So I'm going to let it do its thing right now. I have cherry bushes right here, so we'll see how those do. And then I have a 5-apple apple tree, and that's supposed to be a dwarf tree, so we'll see how that goes. And then across the yard, we have a peach tree, which I know needs some work. It needs to be trimmed, and it needs to be taken care of a little bit. And then I have a 6-plum tree, so we'll see how those work and if they actually produce and they do what they need to. The peach tree was really nice in the spring because it did blossom out, and we had quite a few bees on there. So that's kind of an added benefit when the bees started coming out and everything. So it was a good food source. So the question about inspiration, I kind of like a messy English garden. That's kind of the vibe we're going for. I don't really like all the grass that we have. Slowly, we're planning on getting rid of some of it. I know that with Nebraska Monarchs and with some of the other organizations providing resources and everything, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different types of native plants for pollinators and everything. And obviously I have the space to do that. So we'll see what happens. I watch a lot of YouTube channels, space saving and everything. The cucumber trees, they actually look really cool when the cucumbers grow up through there and makes cucumbers a lot easier to pick. I mean, if we want to walk here just to show how I don't like dealing with stuff. This was all weeds. So a guy from the Omaha Men's Garden Club gave me some horseradish, and he said that that will spread through here. Again, hollyhocks, cannas, hollyhocks, sunflowers, and I hated dealing with the chain link fence. So I ended up finding some tin online that was really inexpensive. So I made these raised beds, and that kind of helps keep everything off the fence and makes it easier to clean this. I've always liked lavender, and I've always read, I bought lavender a couple years ago and it died almost instantly. And a lady told me that lavender doesn't like having their feet wet. So we rebuilt the soil. There's drainage rocks, and then I put sand and then built this, and they seem to be pretty happy. I haven't had any root loss or any plant loss. So hopefully that spreads and takes off. I've kind of been reading up on chemical warfare a little bit on bugs. And I know tomato worms and stuff don't like marigolds, so I have rows of marigolds and nasturtiums to kind of blow through. And I haven't had too many problems with bugs on the tomatoes. But I have dill, sunflowers, tomatoes, beets, eggplants. I raised my squash up. I saw this on YouTube as well, to kind of put them up high to keep them from getting mold and mildew on their leaves. And that seems to have made a difference. Plus, I think it kind of looks cool. Looks like a little hedge.
That guy.
And we extended this so that it's about twice the size of what it was. I built these out of pallets. They're dahlia holders. I could not walk last summer, so I could not get out here and dig my dahlias up. I was really disappointed because I really like these colors. But I'm not too disappointed now because it looks like they lived over the winter. So I had Tahiti Sunrise coming back, and my Cafe au lait at the end is coming back too. So 2 out of them lived. So cannas again. I had cannas in one spot over here, but the migrating hummingbirds in the fall were really territorial over them, and they were really going at each other pretty hard. So I decided I'd put cannas in 3 different areas and kind of spread it out a little bit, share the wealth. Again, a lot of different bees and everything on these flowers. And I didn't have to plant any of this. This all came back. These were all plants that reseeded themselves from last year. You can see there's a honeybee down there. There's a lot of little butterflies. I kind of like the height of this. That way, when I do have the dinner plate dahlias back behind, it'll kind of frame them off a little bit. So I have no intention of changing this. You can see the little tiny bees in here feeding and everything. There's little sweat bees and little carpenter bees. And it's kind of hot right now, but I have noticed that about 4:30, when it starts cooling down, 5:30 starts cooling down, there'll be a lot more different species of bees and butterflies out here. Hummingbirds tend to be a little shy, but definitely have them out here. Again, messy chain link fence. Absolutely hate this. These are blueberries. They taste really good. They're not really particularly happy with the soil right here. So I've decided what I'm going to do is build another raised bed like the ones back behind the garden. I have peat moss and I have some other stuff that I'll add to the soil to make sure that the soil is a little more blueberry friendly. And I'll plant those in here. That would be kind of a twofold thing. It'll provide better soil for the blueberries, and it'll keep me from having to weed the chain link fence. This was kind of an experiment when I first did it. I did beans in there, but that's going to go away. And then in the corner, my neighbor's patio is right here, and she told me that that corner wasn't very happy. So I've decided to do Rose of Sharon, blue Rose of Sharon in there, and I found a really pretty David Austin rose that I want to do, and I ended up building this from wood left over from branches that fell in my yard, and I don't have trees big enough for that, but those branches fell, and then the rest of the wood was from a parade float. So I ended up building that, and hopefully that'll kind of frame this corner out a little bit and have roses. I went to Lorenzen Garden, which is an amazing place for inspiration, I must say. The rose garden over there and the people that take care of that are incredibly nice individuals. We kind of looked at different kinds and looked to see which one the bees were really hanging out on. And those big flat climbing roses tended to have a lot of bees and pollinators on them. So that was kind of the decision-making process for that. Pennies that were inherited, cannas that I've traded back and forth from my aunt in Harvard. Unfortunately, the three things I absolutely hate about Bellevue: creeping Charlie, moles, and Japanese beetles. Not a fan. But usually, I can smash enough of them, keep enough of them from eating everything, and go from there. Strawberries, rhubarb.
I've got a couple of questions here. Where did you get the plans for the cucumber tree?
I saw that on YouTube. I think it was an English gardener thing. And I've seen cucumbers grown on those arches where they take like cattle panels and they bend them in half and form an arch and grow them up in those. So I figured it can't be much different from that. But it looks really cool. In late summer, it looks really funny. They look like trees back there because they'll grow pretty solid all the way up through there. Takes a little work to weave them in there, but it's worth doing.
Got several more questions here for you.
Sure.
Do you have to water all the plants every day, or how do you handle watering?
We've been really lucky the past month because it's been raining quite a bit. I have a couple of things that are kind of water hogs, like the hydrangea in the corner gets pretty droopy pretty fast. But everything else, I mean, I water my tomatoes just to make sure they're producing. These two flower baskets up here get watered every other day because they just get so hot. And the reason I like those is because the hummingbirds really like the pink. And all three of the females that I've seen feed on those pretty regularly. And then they'll dart down to the feeders and they'll feed on those. But they've also been feeding on the hostas and everything, and I haven't had to water those really heavily. I don't water the grass that often. I think last year I watered the grass with the sprinkler maybe 4 times. So I would like to have a water saving system put on, and I went to the city and they have that whole system for that, but that's a chunk of change. Not a lot to come later.
Next question, any problem with peach borers?
I have not, no. So we had that fungus 2 years ago and we sprayed for that, but we didn't have any. I clipped off all the buds just so the tree would grow to get the roots established and get the tree going so it wouldn't put any effort into producing fruit. And clipped off quite a few this year too, just to get it to establish itself a little more. I'm not planning on harvesting massive fruit amounts for another 3-4 years. So I want the trees to be healthy and I want them to be set. Surprisingly, these little guys, they were bare stick, bare root, everything. They're like this tall. That was last spring. This is years worth of growth. They've really taken off.
You were mentioning, I believe, roses for the back corner. Have you ever involved it or tried kind roses?
I have not. I don't even know what that is. Is it a specific species? Is it something that's local? What is it?
You'll need to talk to Nancy Scott.
Oh, I love her.
Because she handles kind roses a lot of places. Nancy's part of it. Joanne Langeby does some too.
So Nancy Scott is in my garden. She gave me this penny. So this little guy. So we're getting it started and everything, and then I'll move it to its forever home. But she gave me that. Once I extend this and figure out what's going to happen in this particular area of the yard. So, and she's an amazing lady. Super nice lady. I have a bunch of planters for her too that I have to get back to her. Any other questions?
Kind roses are roses that have been bred to go back to being less water dependent, not have to be weeded, just so.
The nice thing about that corner, and I don't think I'll have to worry about the watering thing too much, is her downspout goes onto her patio, which goes into that corner, which runs all the way down my fence. That's why I built this up. That's why I built the planters behind the fence, which I'll show you. So I don't think water is going to be an issue in this particular area. That area about there stays pretty wet throughout the year. So I think if I have the plants well established and get the roots going and don't water them too close locally or whatever, I think they'll be good. Anything else?
Let's switch to that right now.
Okay.
Maybe somebody else. Hey, if you have your questions, put them in the chat.
So the cool thing, the bees and bees identification and everything is just something that I've gotten into recently. I do have a biology degree, but I kind of leaned more towards botany with the different types of plants and everything. But I have noticed that the Nebraska Extension Service has a really cool website and everything for information about local bees. And then the Wild Bee ID app is also kind of fun. If you get close enough to them and shoot them and identify it, that's pretty cool. Well, I'm sure there's got to be 50 plus species of bees back here. I think there's 4,000 in the United States. This particular part of the country, there's quite a few different types of bees. So I think we're pretty lucky. I know a lot of people always think of honeybees and the colony bees, but we have a lot of solitary bees, and that's something that I've really kind of tried to attract and tried to have more of. I wouldn't mind having a dirt plot or someplace where the borer bees and the tunnel bees and everything could have a place where they could dig and nest, but I really haven't done enough research on that. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, strawberries, rhubarb, and then I did planters. These are my 3-pallet planters. They're a little droopy, but I am a big fan of hot peppers. So I have tons and tons of hot peppers back here. And it was funny because when I made those, it looked like I had coffins in my driveway. So it's kind of fun. This is also going to get raised bedded. Unfortunately, strawberries and creeping Charlie are not a good mix. And when you get them woven together, it's kind of a mess. So hopefully I can get a raised bed right here and raise my strawberries up and have them. But I've been pretty happy with the production on them. They produce pretty much all summer, so that's been pretty fun. And there's quite a few blooms on them now, so we'll see what happens. I haven't seen a lot of bees on the blooms for these, but I'm sure they visit. It's kind of funny that Japanese beetles eat the rhubarb and they end up dying. So it's like a nice little natural toxin, apparently. I'll get all sorts of little corpses of Japanese beetles below there. And that will get really super tall. If I let it, I cut it all back. It got a little messy. I did get in and clean it up a little bit. It got away from me last summer. I've tried some birdhouses. I have a couple of wrens that like to bounce back and kind of hunt through the flower beds and everything. I haven't heard them. They're usually pretty shy. I was hoping you'd be able to see a couple of hummingbirds and everything, but might be too many people. There's usually not a lot of people in the backyard. So as far as the food production stuff is concerned, we get quite a bit. I canned 122 quarts. Yeah, there was tomatoes, tomato sauce, salsa. We froze beans. We canned green beans. I tried my hands at pickles. I'm terrible at that, by the way. But everything else went in the freezer. The eggplant, the squash, the zucchini. It all saves. So it's been a lot of fun. Plus, I think the plants look cool. And it looks like a cool little hedge. You stand back here and look. Lots of snakes. Tons of garter snakes. When Steve was here one day, he got to see one of them. They're also pretty fast and shy, but I don't have a lot of crickets. I don't have roaches or any of those nasty creepy crawlies. The little snakes take care of those. I had to relocate one of the bigger bull snakes because that thing would have eaten my garter snakes like popcorn. So I ended up taking that in a 5-gallon bucket down to the ditch, put it out there. I haven't had any problems with them since. So there's a big yellow one in that garden. There's a gray one in that one. I've actually had a blue garter snake, so that's been kind of cool. That's pretty much the garden in the yard. So
That's great. I don't have any more questions in the chat. Oh, wait, there's another one. Is that electric shut off on the house for solar panels?
we had solar panels. We ended up getting solar panels, and that's been kind of a learning curve in itself too. So trying to do what we can, be as friendly as possible. So ended up working down the hallway from a guy from SunPro, and they ended up putting them on for us. So that was really nice.
That's all the questions.
Yeah, if you want to referral, woo, we get paid for that. Right now, it's a big thing. I have some bare spots. I don't really want to plant grass seed until I know for sure what's going to go there and what's going to happen, especially since there's a lot of grass that I want to get rid of. I walked through a couple of other people's yards, and this is way too much grass. The what? Oh yeah, plus the sod has that nasty net underneath it. So when you try to dig or do anything, you have to chop through that stuff and then separate it and pull it out and everything else. So that way it doesn't go in your compost pile. Compost pile is new, just did that this year. Just finished the blackberry hedge thing this year. And then once we get the raised bed in the corner, that'll be pretty much it for projects this year. But like I said, couldn't do much last year because I couldn't walk, so it kind of stacked up. There's a lot of stuff you don't really have to do a lot of maintenance on. Like none of these flowers were really maintenance. None of that flower bed, none of that flower bed. So, like I said, make it as easy as you can. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. If you have questions, comments, concerns, let me know.
And we can forward any comments you have, even after this is done, to Scott. He'd be glad to let you know. First, thank you very much, Scott, for all this. This is an awesome garden. For a lazy, cheap guy, this is awesome. Anyway, for anybody, it's awesome. It's so much better than my garden. Anyway, okay. Hey, I have a few announcements. Let's see. First, okay. You can find information on this on our website, greenbellevue.org, or you can go to Green Bellevue's Facebook page, events page, and find more events. We have pollinator garden care every Wednesday, including this coming Wednesday, the 13th, from 4 to 7. And you can find out information about where that's located and what you need to bring and all kinds of stuff. But hey, it's every Wednesday. There's stuff to do. Bellevue Farmers Market is every Saturday, and it's from 8 to noon, and it's Washington Park down near downtown, Old Town Bellevue. Family friendly, dog friendly. And let's see what else is coming up. Hey, on Saturdays, and that's every other Saturday, you can work on the Trailhead Rain Garden, and that's kind of cool. And they're taking care of the dock, thistle, and poison hemlock in the garden. They'll teach you all the how-tos, and you get more information on our website or Facebook events page. Also, we have monthly speakers. This is the second Sunday of this month at 1:30. That's when we have them. August activity yet to be determined. Hey, if you got any ideas, email me at steve.t@greenbellevue.org. That's me, steve.t@greenbellevue.org. And also, okay, but we do have an event for September. Bring the kids. We'll be playing around with homemade play equipment made from repurposed used household items. That will be Sunday, September 11th from 1:30 to whenever we're done, 3 o'clock or whatever. That will be let's see, live and in person at the new gazebo in Washington Park, again near Old Town Bellevue. Also available on Zoom, so you can bring your kids. Well, it's ideal for kids 6 to 11, but it's for anybody who's young at heart. I'm going to play it. Let's see, our presenter that day and guide will be David Corbin. So hey, you can all find all information on our sites. Also, Arrows to Aerospace Parade. Hey, come march with us. It is Saturday, August 20th, and we'll line up around 10. We'll be done before noon, and we're planning on unveiling our next generation T-shirts, and we'll have a brand new logo. If you march with us, you get one free. And the parade is only 1 mile, and as Don says, it's all downhill. Actually, he's not joking. It is pretty much all downhill. Let's see. You get to walk with cool people. It'll be fun. Email me if you want to come along. Again, stevet@greenbellevue.org. Hey, I want to thank all our support. Our videographer is Baden Brumbaugh. Let's see. He's our Green Bellevue student representative. He's at UNL right now. Let's see. We've also had some technical support from Margaret Stamp, one of our board members. We also had some technical support from Scott's husband, Dave, and I'm Steve Fibergo. I already said that, so you don't need to know. Okay, that's awesome. That's all my announcements.
Do you want to make sure?
This is also going to be available on YouTube. It probably won't be up there for a week or so until Bree gets back, but it will be on YouTube. And so, thank you very much.
Do you want to make sure nobody has any? Did anybody have any questions over that last stuff? That after he announced any of that, did anybody have any questions before we call it?
Let's see.
No, that's okay. I just want to
No,
make sure.
there's some things on here. Thank you so much from Nancy B. Really enjoyed it. From Maria, thanks Scott, Steve, and Baden. And Don says, thank you, Scott, Steve, and Baden for a fun program. Green Bellevue is looking for a part-time, Green Bellevue is looking for a part-time planning and communications coordinator. It's part-time, I think it's like 40 hours a month. Anyway, you never know, you might be looking for a job. So that's all my announcements. Thank you, everybody. Till next time.